This afternoon, we're going to do a quick overview of the Supervision Certificate Program. Essentially, what we want to cover in the next 15 or so minutes is who should attend, why should you attend, and what possibly might you learn from the program. So while those of you who are signing in, just a couple of things. There's a chat box to your left, and if you're having trouble seeing me or hearing me, could you please type in or text in a note in the chat box to Sarah. She's my technical expert back in the background here. And if you're having difficulties, just type in whether you can hear, see okay, or if not, and someone will get a hold of you if you're having difficulties. Okay, so in terms of overview, I thought that what I'd begin with is telling you a bit about me, why I'm the principal instructor for the Supervisory Certificate Program. And what I tell my students is while I'm an independent training and development person, I've been fortunate enough to have a very positive working relationship for almost 20 years now with USM. So a lot of people identify me with the university. I am an undergraduate or graduate with a BA from University of Maine at Orono. I did my master's at Southern New Hampshire University. And one of the things that my students give me a lot of feedback on is they like the fact that they are being taught by somebody who has actually managed other people. So while we might talk about some concepts, tools, techniques that you might read about in books, a big focus of this workshop is let's talk about real live examples in real time about real issues. And I always joke in my classroom that in my classroom I want it to be a safe place to learn. So I usually begin by telling people that we're in Vegas, and what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So the first thing I want to share with you is I think I was misled to believe that I would look 20 pounds lighter and 10 years younger, and it's not happening. so, so having said that, let's talk about purpose. My goals for this program is to provide participants with a foundation of skills. Becoming a supervisor, stepping up to a leadership position, is not as easy as one might initially think. I think we've all had situations where we have sat back, watched our supervisor, and tongue-in-cheek said to ourselves, now that job I could do. In fact, I could do that person's job and mine as well. And then when we become a supervisor, we find out there's a lot more to it. And the biggest fundamental difference is that, yes, before I was good at my job, I was a qualified nurse, I was a good machinist, I was a good insurance claim adjuster. Well, what's different now is I not only have to get my work done, I've got to get work done through other people. And that's the core skill and skill set that we work on during this certificate program. And it's comprised of 5 different workshops with 1 elective. So who should attend? This course really is designed for the entry or mid-level supervisor. We have a lot of small business owners who attend, and we also have people who sometimes are fortunate enough to get some training before they're promoted and see this as an opportunity of building their skill set in hopes that a position will become available and they'll have done some training in advance of a change in role. Why should you take it? Well, as I said, supervision and management does require a whole different set of skills. And one of the biggest surprises is that it's easy to get my work done. It's sometimes more challenging to get work done through other people. So communicating those roles, those expectations, what I require, giving clear instructions, when should I engage, how do I motivate, should I coach, and in what ways can I and do I develop other people as they develop their skill sets. And one of the more challenging is how do I assess and evaluate performance? So whether I'm doing this formally with an annual review, even on a day-to-day basis, a big portion of my work is assessing people's capabilities. Are we achieving company and corporate goals? And what can I do as a support person and as a person in a leadership role to role model and challenge for enhanced performance? So the first class is called Stepping Up to Supervision. And in this class, the concept that I really want to get across to people, and this is what sometimes I refer to in class as a Lynism. And a Lynism is simply Lynn's opinion. Well, it's Lynn's opinion that stepping up when you're promoted from within has some unique and special challenges to it. And it's my goal to make that transition successful for you. So in this workshop, we talk a lot and begin our discussion with, well, what's different now that I'm a supervisor? Okay, what makes for an effective supervisor? If I had a choice of the supervisor I would want to work for and with, what would be their behaviors and characteristics? We also talk a bit about leadership style and its impact. Can I modify my leadership style? Should I modify my leadership style? And what areas of strength do I have, and what areas do I think possibly I might need improvement? We're also going to talk about credibility and influence. So while I've been given the title of supervisor or team leader, many people feel that I don't necessarily seem to feel that people are respecting my level of authority, have accepted that I'm in a new role and things will be different. And a lot of questions from participants surround, okay, can I and should I worry about maintaining the friendships I had before I became somebody's supervisor? How should I behave? Can I still go for cocktails after work? Should I participate or continue to have lunch with friends that I had lunch with before? So some of those are the concepts that we talk about. And then we move on to, and this is the entry into talking about giving and receiving constructive feedback. And the case study discussion in the afternoon where we practice this assertive model of communication. Part of it is, how do I clarify expectations? And oftentimes I'm trying to clarify expectations and the staff knows that I didn't always follow these procedures or policies myself. And so how do I handle that? How do I handle knowing that I didn't do everything I should have been and now I'm in a position to supervise others and require them to follow company policy? In the feedback workshop, and I consider this a core communication skill. It's also a workshop that I would encourage everyone to take prior to taking delegation, prior to taking coaching, and certainly before taking poor performance. Is it important that you take them in order? It's my preference that you do. Obviously, for scheduling reasons, a lot of people can't take them in order, but the feedback generally that I get is if people are now going back to do some of the workshops because they've decided to do the certificate, the feedback that I get is that they wish they had taken them in order. With that in mind, we're beginning to offer more opportunities for people to take the certificate program, and we are starting with a offering in Lewiston next month, and I believe March 15th will be the first day that we begin offering the certificate program at the Lewiston location. So what do we discuss when we take the class on using feedback effectively? Well, basically, what we want to be sure that we're doing is it's fact-based and it's objective-based. And we all know that feedback, we would like it to go well, it doesn't always go well. So how do I make sure that the tone, the pitch, the choice of words that I use when I give feedback avoids the use of what I call verbal hooks. Verbal hooks cause people to get angry and defensive. Now, the key actions that we'll review in class don't guarantee that people won't get angry and defensive, but the concept is we want you to feel assertive and confident that you're doing everything you can to make sure that this conversation goes well. And so as an extension of that, in the afternoon session where we really focus in and where people really enjoy is, all right, My conversation, I started well, it's now going south. So what do I respond or how do I come back when an employee says something like, I'm not the only one who does this. Who else have you talked to? Or the employee starts to cry. Um, or they challenge you in terms of whether or not they feel that your expectations or standards of performance are realistic, um, and should there be some accommodation made for style preferences and so forth. So I call these challenging rebuttals. So the concept will be, how do I stay calm, assertive, retain my emotional intelligence, and handle this conversation and keep it on track and reach my communication goal so that at the end of the conversation, we've agreed on what behavior, what action, or what performance that we want to see different. So how are things going to be different in the future, and what level of support can you expect from me, the supervisor, in terms of tools, research, coaching, mentoring, etc. The second is delegation. And while delegation sounds simple, I mean, in its simplest form, delegation simply means giving people clear instructions. Well, the truth is, when we have ingrained processes and procedures in our brain, they become rote and they become automatic. And so we have to back up and think carefully about what we're asking people to do, why we're asking them to do it, and what resources are available so that they can get this task or job done. There also is boundaries, or there may be some authority restrictions that you have in terms of how much you want to let the employee decide on their own. Again, this is going to depend on the skill level and the competence of the employee because, again, this is a progression. We all want empowerment and freedom, but at the same time, when you're responsible and accountable for other people's work performance, you do worry that they might make decisions on their own that you wouldn't have made. And so at what point do I let people run with the ball, and at what point do I sort of rein them in, give them a little boundaries, and set up check-ins. So set up check-ins with me as a supervisor, so that there's no rework and that you stay on track within the boundaries of that particular assignment. And lastly, in this class, all right, while delegation is supposed to be easy, we know it not always is. And so how do I deal with employees who are resistant to new assignments? How do I deal with challenging personalities and behavior? How do I deal with somebody who, quite frankly, doesn't want to learn anything new and is quite happy doing things the same old, same old, same old way? And that's a big focus in the afternoon portion, dealing with those challenges. The third class is coaching to enhance performance. And initially, what I find important to discuss is what's the difference between an effective supervisor and a directive supervisor. And one of those roles is, do I coach and enhance the performance of others? So while coaching involves learning and instruction, there are significant differences in a coaching style versus a traditional top-down supervisory style. So often what I tell people in the classroom is, I remember receiving feedback myself, and so one of the boinks on the head that I got was, Lynn, you're a good supervisor, but you're not a good coach. And I thought I was, which is why I began that workshop with that discussion, because there are clear differences between coaching and directing. And why do we do it? Why is it so important for people today? And what's the step-by-step process? And so a big focus here is, what kinds of inquiry questions? How do I assess people's knowledge and skill level? How do I determine what levels of support, help, or resources do they need? And do I need to push? Do I need to challenge this person to try something different? Might I even have to require them to do something different to get changes going in the correct direction? In terms of core, and this particular workshop dealing with poor performance, um, we want to talk about how do I determine that there's a performance issue. Now, there are training issues, there are communication issues, there are poor performance issues. And so initially, what we need to determine is suboptimal performance occurring? And what are the gaps between the performance I'm looking for and the performance that I'm getting? And it's important that this assessment be objective, which is why I encourage people to come to feedback prior to coming to this class. It's important that you can be objective in your definition of what is happening and objective in what not is happening. And part of that is being clear in your expectations and taking ownership for when you haven't been clear or there's been a misunderstanding as a result of communication. So once we've determined that actually there is a performance issue or there's a gap in performance, what is it and how can we help and coach that person to shorten or lessen that gap in performance? And part of that is going to begin with feedback, and then the corrective action interview simply is an extension of feedback when we've tried to correct suboptimal performance through conversation, and now conversation alone is not taking care of that issue. So a key item that people hear in this class is I'm saying, do you escalate the consequences? Too often when it comes to poor performance, people try giving feedback a couple of times, and then what happens is they throw in the towel and they give up. The concept behind dealing with poor performance is, okay, what steps in the corrective action process do I move to, and when do I move to when I'm now tired of just trying to resolve this through communication and a feedback model? What are the next steps, and what are the appropriate consequences for me to enforce? Certainly want to enforce positive consequences in the beginning, but we may have to move into corrective action. And a portion of this class certainly will be, all right, what kinds of behavior and what kinds of corrective action are appropriate. So picking the appropriate punishment per se that fits the crime. And lastly, I consider flexible leadership. Currently, this is an elective, but we're hoping to offer this in the fall as a sixth course and removing the elective. And I view this class as the capstone. And what I mean by capstone is you'll have the opportunity to do an assessment and rate first, what style do I prefer to use in leadership? Am I more instructive or directive? Am I a stronger coach? Is my area of strength being supportive, or do I empower and delegate others? Just as important, am I directing or instructing people when they should be instructed? Most people new to supervision are very concerned about being a micromanager. I was, and I get a lot of feedback that people are also, because none of us, absolutely none of us, wants to work for a micromanager. So knowing when I direct, when should I transition to coaching, when can I now assume a more supportive role, and what does that sound like and look like? And then finally, when do I delegate? What authority do I delegate? And what resources, restrictions, budget, and whatever negotiables are entailed with that delegation should I be considering? All right. And lastly, can I now flex my style? So it's important to understand that I should, but also that I do flex my style. And the important and critical factor is not flexing style that I think is important to provide, but flexing that style in relationship to the learning needs, the competence and commitment of the employee that we're supervising. I hope that's a brief overview. I don't see that anyone has asked any questions in the chat box, but I'd like to pause for a moment right now to answer any questions that someone has before we wrap up this conversation this afternoon. Oh, thanks, Christine. And Kate's typing. Oh, and Sarah too. Thank you. All right, Christine. Lewiston classes do start. Oh, I'm sorry. I said March 15th. I was incorrect. Thank you, Christine. They start April 15th. I was getting ahead of myself, guys. This is live, and I was hoping we could edit it, but unfortunately, no. So you're getting the real deal this afternoon. All right, Sarah, what are the format for your classes? Instruction, discussion, role plays. Sarah, generally, I like to think of my workshops as interactive we do skills practice and exercises. Oftentimes I begin with a self-assessment or a true or false quiz to help you think about the topic. Then we move into some facilitated discussion about definitions, understandings, do's and don'ts, and we might use feedback as a model. And then we get into key actions. All right, so what's the process I'm going to go through with feedback? And then we break down each of those key actions into concepts and exercises to reinforce those concepts. And then as a result of reviewing those concepts, then we have structured exercises. And then also potentially role play with me or role play with a co-participant so that you have an opportunity to practice those skills. And that's generally the format. I think the feedback that I get from people with respect to my workshops is there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of Q&A. People realize pretty quickly that they're speaking to somebody that has supervised and managed other people. And oftentimes one of the exercises that we do is I ask everybody to write on a note card 3 questions they have about today's topic that they want answered before today's over. And then we pass these around and then we sort of poll people with respect to the most important questions so that you can leave having your most important questions answered as a result of taking that workshop. Now, Katie, you mentioned that you have learned that you are a good but coaching is not your forte. Well, I'd like to think I'm better now. Have you found people can do both well? All right, Katie, I do think that there are people that naturally coach others. I think what's difficult when we become a supervisor is we're clear on how to instruct and direct, but we're reticent to direct because it sounds and feels like micromanaging. So what I see happening is people do direct, they teach, they instruct, but then they skip coaching and they go right to see me with questions. Now you're in the supportive role, but there's a whole series of things that need to happen in the coaching role. Because we all know that we've received instructions, and I've been guilty of this, where someone said, Lynn, do you understand? And I go, yeah. And can you repeat after me? And no, I got it. And then I go back, and I'm trying to do the task that they asked of me, and I get stumped. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, Mary just taught me how to do this, and I reassured her I knew what to do. Now I'm embarrassed. I don't really want to go back and ask questions. So a big part of coaching is, even though people tell us, don't follow up with me, we want to make that follow-up comfortable. We want to make that follow-up routine, just as we want to make that feedback routine, because this isn't an opportunity to criticize your work. This is an opportunity to guide, to instruct, to see opportunities for you to fail forward and improve your work performance. And so with coaching, I found the reason why I was told I was a good supervisor and not a good coach is I did a lot of telling. I didn't ask a lot of questions. And that's part of what I want to get across to people when they take the coaching workshop. Ask more questions. Even when you know the answer, what's important is that the employee knows the answer, not that you prove that you have the answer. Okay. Any other questions or elaborations that I might add? Katie, thanks. Sarah, sounds terrific. Thanks. Let me just share last slide, and if any other questions get typed up, what I do want And yeah, I want this to be fun, guys. I want this to be interactive, engaged. I tell people, challenge me, and they do. I also tell them to bust me. So if you hear something you don't like, challenge it, question it. That's why we're in Vegas, and what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And most importantly, your interaction and willingness to participate in this class really enhances, all right, my ability to make this about you learning the skills that you need to apply when you get back on the job. So I hope this has been helpful to give people an overview or an oversight of the certificate program. I hope you will join me and the university. And if you have additional questions, you can contact the university at the following email, usmpdp@maine.edu, or call the office at 780-59-100. Thank you very much. This is Lynn Richards from USM. I hope to see you in the future in one of my classes that's part of the Supervision Certificate Program here at USM. Thank you.